Okay, before we get, I'm working on getting Sherry here with us as a guest. Sherry?
Wonderful to see you. I'm sorry it took so long.
No, it did not. I'm really glad to have you here with me. How are you? Good morning.
Well, good morning. I'm in Indian Wells, California, and I think for you it's good evening. So
Yes.
thank you so much for having me, and I'm excited to be with you and your audience and your
Thank you
regular
so much.
listeners, so viewers.
We're really honored and really glad and lucky to have you here with us this morning slash evening, the 9th of July. I've been promising the followers here that on behalf of you and I, from the Consulate General in Dubai and the US Embassy from Abu Dhabi, we'll be talking today and discussing cultural diplomacy. I will be switching off the comments for a while. We will be discussing in through about 20 to 25 minutes about cultural diplomacy, and then we will open up the area for some Q&A session. Is that okay with you, Sherry?
Sounds good to me.
Great. After that, ladies and gentlemen, we will have another guest. We didn't announce for that, so it'd be sort of a bonus thing tonight with us. Afterwards, Yasmin will be also with us live. She will talk about what the actual Consulate General here of the US in Dubai has to offer and about the exchange programs. So should you have any questions regarding whether they are for the cultural diplomacy, for Sherry or for me, or later on for the US Embassy here in the UAE, later for Yasmin, please drop your question, and there is like a question mark down here with the Q&A section, and then we will be getting really shortly and answering you after the first about 25 minutes of me and Sherry discussing cultural diplomacy. I will be switching off the comments, so we won't be just focusing on what we get to say. Again, welcome, Sherry. I'm really honored to have you today.
Well, it's my pleasure to be here. Iman, thank you so much for this opportunity to talk about one of my favorite topics. And I'm particularly grateful to the US Consulate in Dubai for connecting us, for making this possible. In some ways, I think it's so appropriate that this program originate in the UAE, because you are about to host, well, it's been postponed thanks to the virus a year, but a World Expo. And I think of expos as the Olympics of cultural diplomacy. It is really an incredible opportunity to share your culture with the world, but also to help so many others interact.
True. I totally agree. Sherry, I don't want you to get along yet. I did not introduce you. I mean, I was impressed reading that everything that you've accomplished and you've been going through. You had a blast of articles and awards and getting along with a lot of countries around the world. So I'll be introducing you, but just a part, just a brief of what you have accomplished. It's an impressive bio. For everyone who's watching us right now, Sherry Mueller, she has a PhD, Distinguished Practitioner in Residence at the School of International Service, SIS, American University, Washington, D.C. teaches an undergraduate course and a graduate practicum entitled Cultural Diplomacy and International Exchange. Dr. Mueller is an active volunteer and has served on the boards of various nonprofit organizations, including World Learning, the Public Diplomacy Council, Friendship Force International, Business for Diplomatic Action, and the U.S. Center for Citizen Diplomacy. In May 2017, the School of International Service presented Dr. Mueller with an Excellent in Teaching Awards as an adjunct professor. In 2011, One to World presented Dr. Mueller with the Fulbright Award for Citizen Diplomacy for lifelong contributions to global understanding and cooperation. One handshake at a time. I love this title, by the way, and we'll get shortly into much more, is Fulbright tradition. Dr. Mueller has lived in Brazil, where she taught English. Very impressive. Participated in an experiment in international living program in Germany, and has traveled extensively throughout Europe and Southeast Asia. She has served as speaker for the U.S. Department of State in Saudi Arabia and Japan. Selected publications include The Impact and Practice of Citizen Diplomacy and Public Diplomacy magazine, published by University of Southern California, 2012, and Professional Exchange Citizen Diplomacy and Credibility and America's Dialogue with the World, published by the Public Diplomacy Council in 2008. I had to read this, of course. I did not memorize it, and I had to cut along. It's quite impressive bio. Sherry, again, how lucky are we today to have you? Thank you so much for having this time talking about cultural diplomacy. Again, as you were saying, it's one of our mutual, very favorite topic to go. Okay, should we start?
Sure. That was a very generous introduction. And I just am familiar with your bio as well, and I'm a bit humbled. You've accomplished so much. Anyway, delighted. Where do you want to start, Iman?
Okay, we'll do some time traveling here at the beginning. So we will start with the actual concept of cultural diplomacy. How did it all started? And what is the connection between cultural diplomacy and the United States of America? What type of cultural diplomacy it promotes? Why it started there? Why is it that's related to the US?
Well, why don't I begin with there are many definitions of cultural diplomacy, as you know. I'll begin with one that is a simple one, but I think covers it. It's a government's effort to project, to share, and to generate appreciation for their culture, a country's values, its history, its heritage, its accomplishments. It's what you want the world to perceive about you. And most major countries are very concerned with how they're perceived abroad. What Professor Nick Cull calls reputational security. Most major powers care about their reputations, and they most realize that global problems are, in this turbulent world of ours, are so complicated that one country can never do it alone, and that we need to generate understanding and the ability to cooperate. And I think of cultural diplomacy is that web of human connections that is the context for all other negotiations, whether it's an economic treaty, whether it's a trade, economic or trade, whether it's protocols for global health. And you may know, I'll link back to the US now. We just celebrated our independence from the British, the 4th of July last week. And I was rereading the Declaration of Independence. And it's interesting that back in 1776, the founding fathers were concerned with how we were perceived abroad. And, you know, the document, the declaration, when in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve their political bands, Jefferson said, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they explain it. So this has been a long-standing concern that is shared by many major powers around the world.
Okay. I want to jump to the next question. I want to make as room for as possible of questions as there is. But you were talking, just before we go to this second question, you were talking about the country's reputation, managing their reputation abroad. And I've been going around reading about cultural diplomacy, studying cultural diplomacy, and a lot of people nowadays talk about country branding. So how does this go along with the reputation? Is it the same thing?
To me, it is. I think there are a lot of artificial distinctions that
Yeah.
theorists like to put. And I think it's good to read about all of it, but
Yes.
I don't see a major difference between country branding and what I would call maybe a deeper building of relationships that cultural diplomacy represents. But basically, it's all about how are we perceived abroad,
Yes.
and how do we help shape those perceptions?
Yes, yeah. I'm glad you're putting it this way because it makes it easy for us to just smoothly go into our next question. I mean, USA, the United States of America, is a pioneer in cultural diplomacy. And even when I studied cultural diplomacy in Berlin, Germany in 2017, we studied US, as a success story and as a pioneer, as a lesson learned for the entire world. And then we just, back to the countries of the globe, whether it's European or Asian experiences. Now, regarding the US, the cultural diplomacy promotes itself, if we may say so, during the exchange programs, grants, bringing experts, meeting each others, having this foreign audience. Now, thinking that these types of cultural diplomacy has strings attached, if we may say so, or have different agendas
Mhm.
farther away than cultural diplomacy. Can you explain more about these? Especially the exchange programs and the grants. What do the US wants exactly out of them?
Well, you bring up, I think, a really interesting cultural idiom that doesn't translate well into many foreign languages. The whole
Yes.
notion, for example, let's use the International Visitor Leadership Program. I think when a US ambassador or a US cultural affairs officer invites a foreign leader to come to the US and have firsthand experience, what we would mean by that, no strings attached, there's no definitive outcome. You as a journalist aren't required to produce op-ed pieces. What I think is expected is that whomever comes with an open mind and a willingness to set stereotypes aside, a willingness to get beyond the headlines, to meet with people in their offices, in their homes, and to really have an open mind about this complex place that is the United States of America, that is very hard to explain. And the diversity of political opinion and the way they play out, I think you almost have to be there to
Yeah.
not entirely understand it. But that firsthand experience that you get through exchange programs, I think is fundamental. And while you described us as a pioneer, if I could find a way to generate more funds for
Yes.
those kinds of soft power programs, I've spent a fair amount of my career trying to do that. So I just wish we invested in it even more than we do, because I think it's a fundamental component of foreign relations.
Yes. I mean, I just had okay, I was having my iPhone here with the questions, that's why. Uh, that was fun.
Well,
I
this is my
cannot.
first time on Instagram Live, so I'm enjoying it, and thank you for making it easy.
Thank you. I mean, I enjoy having those conversations with you because it's cultural diplomacy and because it's you make it sound really fun and easy with all these anecdotes and stories and experiences. And if we would talk, you and I, about a shared experience. Now, we were talking about the exchange programs generated by the US, how people, maybe let's say foreigners, have this prospect, and how do they see them, and how do they may think that they would have something maybe further than cultural diplomacy, while we are talking about countries promoting or branding themselves or marketing for, although I disagree with the words marketing or the phrase, but at the end of the day, we are getting to know more about each other. And we have a shared experience with the program, the writers program in Iowa. It's the most prestigious creative writing program, and it started in 1967. And you have an experience of having dealt with them interviewing, I guess, students 3 years in a row. My experience was I was the first Emirati to join the program, to participate and to get a fellowship in creative writing in 2018. Sherry, you start. You get the lead here. How was this experience to you?
Well, first of all, I want to say congratulations, Iman, because it is an achievement to be selected to participate. Since 1967, there have only been 1,500 alumni. They represent more than 150 countries. And I really view the International Writing Program, which gets substantial, really essential funding from the US Department of State, but it is totally run by the program itself, which is a 501c3, a nonprofit organization with the help of a lot of volunteers at the University of Iowa. I was privileged to, when I worked for the Institute of International Education, one of my assignments was to go and interview the writers about where they wanted to travel in the United States. And I got to participate and listen to them do their readings and hear incredible writers, literally from around the world, do large programs. But most important, I enjoyed home hospitality with the founders of the program, Paul Engel and his wife, who was originally from China, Hua Ling, would have this was in the 80s, I might add, the late 80s, they would have all of the writers to their home, and the conversations about creativity and the circumstances within which writers need to let me just go back. What it does, it's a residential program, and I think ideally it gives writers time, which is such a precious commodity, time and space and some serenity to write. I was looking at your own background and impressed with the Emirates Novel Award you received for your novel Guard of the Sun in 2015. So I can see why you wound up in Iowa City. What are some of your favorite memories from participating in what I do agree is probably one of the most significant programs of cultural diplomacy ever started?
I mean, Sherry, since 2018, I came back in November from Iowa. I've been talking about nothing but this program and nothing but Iowa. As a child, I spent all my childhood in the US, but I've never been in Iowa itself. I spent my childhood in Indiana, between Indiana and Arizona. My uncle and aunts are there. They reside there. But having this program, staying with 30 different writers from all over the world, having this shared experience all together by ourselves, talking all day and night about writing, getting this closeness with the US culture, because when we reached there, and that program started in August, in 18th August in 2018. And since we reached there, for the first couple of weeks, we've been introduced to the US culture, to the US cuisine, music, politics, and as you were saying, you cannot, I mean, we both have a great deal of knowledge in cultural diplomacy, but you cannot ever market a country without actually having this experience. And this is where the exchange programs come in. You live day by day. I got to get to readings and to classes with freshmen and sophomores who are American students studying creative writing or journalism or media, and get to hear from them. One of the most memorable experiences that I had is when we went to the Mississippi River, and then I still have the picture there, and I get to stand and take a picture with 3 different states at the background, because Mississippi River crosses those Illinois, Wisconsin, and Iowa. And I think it was from Dubuque that you could have this very unique, marvelous view. One more thing, just to brush along, it was an eye-opening experience for me, Sherry. I wrote a movie. It's called Rafa.
Mm.
Rafa is a local Emirati tree. You can find it in a lot of Arabic countries also, but it's the national Emirati tree. It's like the tree called mesquite. You can
Ah.
also find it
Mhm.
in the US. Yes, it's sort of the same family. And I wrote the movie. It's a short movie. It was screened in Dubai Film Festival in 2017, and it's about three Emirati women. It was the first feminist Emirati movie. And when I got to Iowa, I screenplayed the movie twice. And I was used to kind of questions because it's only 16 minutes movie. And then we used to discuss afterwards. And I used to get all kind of questions. So I expected a lot of weird questions. But what happened is in the US, I was asked a really weird, I did not think about the answer even. One asked me, and he was a scholar, a senior scholar, and he asked me, why do you all wear black? And that question shook me to the core. I mean, I'm wearing black right now. We wear black all the time. I mean, when we get dressed too, not at our homes, but it's sort of the traditionally costume, if I may say so. And we have colorful, what I'm wearing is abaya, we have colorful abayas too. But generally speaking, yes, we do wear black, women wear black most of their time. And I never thought about this. And I was just standing there and realizing, yes, cultural diplomacy needs a two-way understanding. I need to know, how do you see me? How do you think of me out of your own understanding? And how do I look like to you? Because what it may have been a lifetime experience, something that I'm getting used to, it's something that you don't get in your culture.
Mhm.
And we face
Mhm.
this, whether you're talking to a Japanese or a Chinese or an American or German person. So sorry, I took a lot of your time, but this was a very shocking to the core experience that I got in Iowa.
Interesting.
Yes,
Fascinating.
I could not answer him. So I was like, oh, why do I wear black? Yeah. Um, again, because I wanted for my story to take us smoothly to something you told me, something you mentioned earlier. Um, one of the calls, you were talking about the 3 R's of cultural diplomacy. And I was really eager to hear more about what are those 3 R's? What do they get to do with cultural diplomacy?
Yeah. I'm actually thinking of a fourth R, but we'll talk
Oh,
about that later. I really think of and I try to convey to my students um, three fundamental principles of,
mhm.
I think, successful cultural diplomacy programs, successful exchange programs. One you just alluded to, Iman, when you talked about two-way understanding. The first R, the English letter R, is
Yeah.
reciprocity. The whole
Okay.
notion that information has to flow not from a host to a visitor, or it needs to flow in both directions. You articulated it so well, I don't need to spend much time on it, but I
Yeah.
would give you one story as an example of how I think about it from the
Okay.
American perspective. Um, Years ago, our cultural diplomacy was handled by an agency, a federal agency called the United States Information Agency. And it was folded into the US Department of State in 1999 for all kinds of reasons. But anyway, on the building in Washington that I had to go into many times, there was a brass plaque, and it said on the outside, telling America's story. And in a
Wow.
way, that is what cultural diplomacy does. It tells a country's story. But
Yes.
I always wanted to add a line to that plaque. Telling America's story is done best by good listeners, because that
Yeah.
line would capture the reciprocity, the partnership. It was really important that when you were part of the international writing program, you presented your work. And that's one of the strengths of that program, is it has information flowing in every direction. Second R,
Mm-hmm.
relationship building, which is so close to the
I support.
reciprocity piece.
Yes.
The question isn't how many people did you meet, it's how many people will you stay in touch with, will become part of your professional network going forward, who will help you, whom you will help. So that, remember we said earlier, the relationships built with these cultural and educational exchange programs, they're the context for everything else that happens.
Yes.
And finally, the third R is the relentless search for common ground. Not my words. I first heard them when President Clinton received the Fulbright Association Award back in the 90s. And he talked about that. And the words stayed with me because they capture to me the essence of cultural diplomacy.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, part of what it should do is help us appreciate differences. It should
Yes.
help us understand where those differences came from and how they're going to influence behavior going forward. But the much more important part is the part where we find our common human aspirations. What is it that we all share? And whether it's a film, whether it's an exchange program, whether it's a concert, whether it's a sports envoy that teaches ice skating or baseball, like Cal Ripken in Japan, any one of those examples, it's where we find the common, the need to excel, the fact that we want better education for our children.
Yeah.
So I would say the heart of it is common human aspirations.
I totally agree. I mean, okay, we are kind of running out of time. We have the room for really going through this. I don't want to cancel this question because it's one of my favorites. I wanted to ask you about an article that you wrote, and it was really intriguing. And I could not forget what you said the other day. It's called Please Speak to Strangers. Sherry, if you can just answer in like couple of minutes and then we will just go fast because I can see questions piling up. So
Okay.
to get to answer
Well,
all the questions.
first of all, I co-authored the article with a young colleague, and it's really based on a family story. I grew up on a farm in northern Illinois, very near where you were in Iowa there.
Yes.
Nothing international in my background. I mean, I showed cattle at the county fair, okay? And think about it, this is 1963. And my 4-H leader had participated in a farmer to farmer exchange with the then Soviet Union. He came back, so of course, I saw it, just opened my eyes, and I wanted to go on an exchange program. And so I went, was scheduled to go to Germany to live with a
Okay.
German family. And by the way, on my way home from Dubai last November, I
Oh,
had a reunion with a sister in that family. But
oh my
the
God, that's
point,
amazing.
yeah, but the family story is that my mom and dad were putting me on an airplane at O'Hare so I
Okay.
could fly to New York and catch a student ship. And I didn't know anyone in Germany. I didn't know anyone in my American group. And the last thing my mother said to me was, Sherry, don't speak to strangers. And people who know me well, Iman, laugh at that because I made a career out of speaking to
Yes.
strangers and encouraging other people to do it and promoting citizen diplomacy, the concept that each of us has the responsibility to help put our country's best foot forward.
Yes.
And I know you did that in Iowa City, and you will have many more opportunities for that. But so let me
Yeah.
end my part of this program by encouraging every one of your viewers to please speak to strangers, set aside some of those stereotypes, and begin to appreciate the nuanced complexities that are really characteristic of every culture.
Yes, yes. I second that. Please speak to strangers. Some of the most close friends that I have, amazing people in my life, they were strangers once in my life, and I
Exactly.
spoke to them, and it started a conversation. And I am still in touch with a lot of the writers I met in Iowa, a lot of the faculty there, the
Excellent.
students. And I mean, we had a Facebook group, and when the corona pandemic started, you know, they were checking on each other. You know, it's like, what is it? How is it in your
Hmm.
country? How is it? How are you doing? So that was very, very amazing. So please, guys, speak to strangers. Take it from Sherry. Okay, Sherry, so we don't, you know, rush ourselves because we are out of time here. I will go very fast through the questions. Let's start with the question. Okay. Cultural diplomacy. Okay, here we go. Just a second. Okay. She said, I have a question about how the cultural diplomacy can be built if we come from different political systems. Okay, I don't still have Sherry here. If I can have you, Sherry, back. Just a second. I'll try to pull Sherry back.
Okay.
Sherry, I'm glad to have you back.
Well, I thought you were going to have another
No,
guest.
not yet.
Not just yet.
Yes.
Oh, okay. I
We still
apologize.
have, Sherry, we still have about 3 to 4 minutes until we pull
Oh,
Yasmin.
okay.
So, yes. So I wanted you to answer this. It's a very good question that I've chosen from the group questions that we had. She's saying that she has a question, cultural diplomacy. If we are to come from different political systems, how can the culture can be built? Okay, she wants to know how she can she build cultural diplomacy if they come from different political systems. I think this.
Well, she's putting her finger on one of the challenges we're finding in our home culture right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the answer is yes. In fact, it's even more important to build those relationships. And I find one of the things that's very helpful is to know more about the history of the whatever the political system is that you're about to interact with. So doing your homework and asking gentle questions, and really sometimes I have a book on international careers out, and every now and then people say to me, well, what is the qualification you need to be successful in international jobs, international affairs? And I always say it's a genuine curiosity. What we need to really want to learn, I think. And in the process of learning, you convey that. And I think it makes the other person who may represent a whole different political system or way of thinking. I mean, we're doing a lot of this, and I'm trying to practice what I preach at home now, because it's a very unusual time in the US. And I would just invite people to look at the article that appeared in Harper's yesterday, where about 150 artists, writers, intellectuals have literally called for people to put aside their unwillingness to be patient and to listen carefully to the other side of arguments.
That's amazing.
So I think we don't have any choice but to try. It's very much a mistake to say, I'm not going to engage because I might annoy somebody or they may think less of me. I think you've got to speak to strangers, and you've got to speak to strangers who have differing views than you do. And it's amazing what certainly I've learned in the process of doing that.
I totally agree. Sherry, I cannot thank you enough for being with us tonight. Please stay with us. I will try now to just pull Yasmin to conclude some of the talks that we are having tonight. But we can never have enough from you, Sherry. You're such an amazing person, and we can never have enough from cultural diplomacy.
Well, I hope we can continue this in different ways, Iman. Thank you for this opportunity. It's very special to me, having just been in Dubai last November. So.
Thank you so much, and hopefully we get to meet with you soon. I don't know how. After this pandemic is over, we will.
Well, I want to come to Dubai 2020,
Please.
even though it happens in
yes.
2021.
You will definitely have to. Yes, you'll definitely have to join with the expo. I'm glad it got postponed until 2021. So, crossing fingers. Yes.
Okay,
yes.
we will.
Thank you so much. Thank you so
You're
much,
welcome now.
Sherry. It was such an amazing talk with Sherry here. I'll try to pull now Yasmin. She's the head of public affairs, and she will be talking about, or on behalf on the Consulate General from Dubai, and she'll be answering a lot of still your questions and talking about the exchange program they have to offer. Okay, let me see. We can push Yasmin here. Yasmin, good evening.
Hi, Iman. How are you?
Fine. How are you, dear? It's an amazing having you after Sherry. I think you complement each other. What you have to say? Sherry was amazing. I did not feel the time just pass by with her. I wanted for this to get even longer. Maybe we can have something also later on. We had a lot of questions too, so I had to pick one that she did not talk about earlier with the questions that we mentioned. Yasmin, I introduced you earlier, just quite seconds before. You are the head of public affairs at Consulate General Dubai, and you will be talking to us today about what does the Consulate General of Dubai has to offer, the programs, the exchange programs, and we'll take it further on. And we'll see afterwards if we have any questions from the followers. Please.
Okay, great. Thanks for that intro, Iman. And I love that. I felt like Sherry gave sort of a broad overview on what cultural diplomacy is. And now I can give sort of the micro in terms of how specifically we do cultural diplomacy here in the UAE. So in Mission UAE, between the consulate and the embassy, we do all kinds of exchanges and cultural programming. I can give you like a few examples. So we bring like top US speakers here to the UAE. For instance, we partnered with Nama in Sharjah to bring a speaker. Her name was Greta Shetler. She works for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And she talked about, post COVID-19, what does entrepreneurship look like? So, and we did virtual exchanges. So we actually haven't stopped working even with the pandemic.
Perfect.
We do other types of diplomacy. So we do like film diplomacy, music diplomacy. We've worked with Emirates Lit Fest to bring US authors here to the UAE as well. We've worked with Ras Al Khaimah Fine Arts Festival to bring an artist as well to be featured there. We've worked with the Sharjah Sports Council to bring former NBA and WNBA players to teach their athletes and their coaches about our best practices. So a lot of what we do is we bring people here, but we also send people to the US as well. Sherry mentioned one of our flagship programs, which is the International Visitor Leadership Program. And people spend 3 weeks in traveling across the US and meeting with different experts in their fields. We also have what's called the Fulbright program, where we take people and put them at different universities in the US, and we bring US researchers here to the UAE. So it's a lot of exchange. It's a lot of, bringing what we feel the best that the US has to offer to the UAE.
Perfect. Yasmin, if you don't mind also talking a little bit more about the programs, the exchange programs or the programs. I have here a list, it says the FLTA, the IWP, which we mentioned, but if you can just go a little bit more in specific, in details for who is following us now, who is hearing us, listening to, watching, and they have no idea about these programs. You also have the speakers, grant programs, art diplomacy, music diplomacy, culinary diplomacy, film diplomacy, and media diplomacy. So if you can please kindly go into a little bit of details and depth, especially regarding the FLTA, the speakers program, the IWP program, something like that. Yes.
Yeah, sure. So I talked about the speakers program. So that's again where we bring, experts from the US here, but then, also for FLTA, which is the Fulbright Language Teaching Assistant Program. And that's where, we pay for Emiratis to go to the US and actually teach Arabic. And so that's fully funded by us. We pay for the full year that you're there. We have people we can put you in touch with that have done the program previously, and they can give you information. We also have visiting scholars, and so that's where you bring, Americans here. It's also where we send Emiratis to the US as well, and we've partnered with AUS here, AUD, Sharjah University, and we have there's so many different types of programs, and we even have things that we have grants as well, where we give nonprofits funding to start and do different programs. And so for us, it's all about connecting with audiences here. And these are sort of these are the tools in our toolkit on how we can do that. And so we always tell people to get in touch with us, to work with us, to come to our events. And so we can find ways of mutual understanding, basically.
That's perfect. I have a question, but I'll just keep it for myself for now. I'll just try to see, because we're having a lot of questions now. I see the number increasing and I cannot. Okay, let's see what kind of questions we're receiving here. Well, actually, someone is asking what is the possible fourth R, but that's that was a question for
Sherry. Yeah.
Yes, that was Sherry. A lot are thanking the live today. They said they enjoy, they have a great time. Just a second. Yes. Okay. I guess I can ask the question I have in mind. That's amazing. Okay. Okay. Well, actually, Yasmin, my question would bring us back to, I want to erase this. Yeah. Okay. My question would just bring us back. It's sort of the cycle. We started actually this question at the beginning of this live session. And now that we are reaching towards the end and we're having you with us after Sherry, the question is, we are the US, whether it's the embassy from Abu Dhabi or the consulate in Dubai, providing all this amazing exchange programs or the grants. And how can this come into into place with cultural diplomacy, with the way that you view the cultural diplomacy as the US mission in UAE? I mean, a lot of people, maybe they're just asking themselves also this question. So if we can put this into context, how can, from the understanding of cultural diplomacy, reach into this mutual, maybe, understanding, as Sherry was saying, hearing each other, listening to each other, through these grants and programs?
Yeah, I think so. The purpose of all these tools, right, that I talked about is really to help us understand each other's cultures, right? And really find our similarities, because at the end of the day, you find that there's a lot of commonalities in all of our cultures, right? Whether it's the importance of family, it's the importance of love and traditions and connection and community. These are very universal things. So in a way, we're trying to show how we're all connected in this way. And, to showcase our experts or our expertise that we want to share with the world. And so cultural diplomacy is a way to do that, right? It's a way to bring people together and connect them.
Yes. Yasmin, before we finalize our live session for tonight, say I am a person that is watching this live later or right now, and I want to get to know more about these programs or to get in touch with you. How is that possible? What is the best way?
So I think the best way is social media. So follow us on our account, which is USA in UAE. We post a lot of our programs there, whether it's upcoming, workshops or upcoming events. Follow us where it's the same handle on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram. Whatever your medium is, we're on it, and you can follow us there. But that's sort of the best avenue I would suggest for people to get in touch with us.
Yes, I second that, since I follow you and I keep up with the events, and they are so worth it. As you were saying, it's a combination from working with a lot of entities here in the UAE with the American perspective, and I love the movie nights that you do once at a time, and regarding the exchange programs. I mean, I have been the first Emirati getting the creative writing fellowship from the IWP program, and it's a life-changing experience. Thank you so much, Yasmin, for this insightful talk about cultural diplomacy, about the exchange programs, about what does the U.S. Embassy or the Consulate has to offer. And I second my thanks to our amazing guest tonight, Sherry Mueller. Hopefully we'll get to meet her again, maybe through social media, another session talking about cultural diplomacy. Thank you so much, Yasmin, and thank you for everyone who've been watching, listening, or sending their questions and participating. Wish you all a very great night. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks, Iman. Bye.
Bye.